everybody, it's Katie here, and it is time to talk about my favourite books from 2019. And I know this video is a little late, but let's focus on the fact that I'm actually making this video, which is more than can be said for last year. So there's only 7 books in this countdown. As we all know, my reading was terrible in 2019, but I'm actually quite proud of the fact that I do in fact have 7. It's enough for a list. So let's just jump right in and see what books I loved last year. So the first book in this list is Queen of Air and Darkness by Cassandra Clare, and I am not going to be holding this book whilst talking about it because it is far too heavy. So because I wasn't really on BookTube that much last year, I didn't really film a discussion video for Queen of Air and Darkness. I didn't do one for Lord of Shadows either, so I'm hoping to maybe make a video about the trilogy in general. Cassandra Clare books are usually very high up on my list, if not the #1. But as much as I loved Queen of Air and Darkness, this trilogy in general hasn't been my favourite of her series. There have been aspects of it that I have completely adored, but overall it just doesn't have the same impact as The Mortal Instruments or The Infernal Devices did for me. I love the characters mostly. See, the thing is, I prefer the other characters in this trilogy. Emma and Julian aren't really my favourites. I tend to prefer reading about everyone else, and I think that might be why this series isn't my favourite. But I do actually love it, and there are so many points in that book where I couldn't believe what I was reading. In particular, Thule. I can't even describe the emotions I went through when reading those chapters. Oh my god. So yeah, it's a bit of a mixed bag when it comes to Queen of Air and Darkness, but it is still on my list of favourites because I did love it. So #6 is The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue. I had been wanting to read this book since it was released anyway, but I didn't manage to get my hands on a copy until Christmas 2018. My best friend got it for me and I finally got to read it in 2019. I love this book so much. These characters are so hilarious. Monty he's a mess, but he's a brilliant mess. Even though it took me so long to get to this book compared to everyone else, I managed to stay well away from spoilers, so I didn't really have any clue what it was about. And I'm glad I stayed away from knowing anything about the plot because there was a lot. I didn't expect this sort of supernatural twist that it had to things with this all magical cure for everything that they are tracking down. It's kind of like a race and a hunt, and I just didn't expect that. I don't know what I was expecting, but it wasn't particularly that, but I completely enjoyed it. Despite the fact that there are pretty sad things touched upon in this book, it's still a feel-good novel. It left me so happy, and I need to get my hands on the next book because Felicity, I love her. #5 on this list is That Asian Kid by Savita Kalhan. This book is a perfect example of how casual racism still goes on in schools across the country. And it's not just limited to the pupils. So this story is about a character named Jeevan, and he's being consistently marked down by a teacher, and he believes the reason behind that is because he's Asian. And he starts looking into her past with pupils of colour and how she's been able to get away with her prejudice. So Jeevan and his friends are wonderful characters to read about, but yeah, the story is quite dark at times because of the situation that it's about. So I really loved how this book managed to mix up dealing with racism and also telling the story of just a normal teenager trying to get through high school, trying to work towards the grades he deserves. So #4 is Alice in Wonderland by Simon James Green. I am constantly praising Simon's books. His stories are just so heartwarming. I wish I'd had stories like his back when I was in high school. So this story follows Alex, who is an exceptionally awkward teenager. He needs to get a summer job and he accidentally finds himself working at Wonderland, which is the local rundown arcade. And basically this book is just about Alex being a complete mess and trying to make it through each day. And it is hilarious. It's so funny. There were parts where I was actually crying with laughter. I just couldn't cope with some of the wild moments in this book. I also liked the setting of the story as well because it's in this rundown seaside type town. I actually live quite close to a town on the coast, and there is an arcade that reminds me so much of Wonderland, and I think it's actually being knocked down, but it was a place that I loved to go when I was growing up and throughout my teen years. So reading about Alex's attachment to Wonderland and to the way it's part of the town in general really hit home with me. So yeah, I have a lot of love in my heart for this book. Number 3 is Call Down the Hawk by Maggie Stiefvater. I mean, technically I cheated a little bit because I didn't actually finish it until January, but I started reading it in 2019, so we're gonna include it here. I haven't actually posted a review on this yet, either on my blog or my channel, because I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. What I will say is that it hurt my brain in a good way, if that's possible. It was a very typical Maggie Stiefvater book, in that for the most part you follow these characters that you've gotten to know throughout the story, and then the closer it gets to the end, the more chaotic things get, and you start getting these quick little chapters that focus on people that we haven't met in the story before. It tells you everything about their life within 2 or 3 pages, and you end up feeling sorry for this character that you don't know, and then suddenly they're not in the story anymore. And you just get stressed because these little chapters are included more and more as you get to the end, and you don't know what's going on. And then you have these moments where you're like, oh, that's what's happening. So I will probably talk more in depth about this story at some point. Number 2 is I Was Born for This by Alice Osman. I cannot stress enough how much I love this story. And this book was actually given to me by my friend Jasmine, who picked up the book, but once she realised what the subject was about and what the story followed, she gave it to me because she knew it would be something that I'd love. And as always, she was completely right. It is about a fictional band called The Ark. The frontman of the band is called Jimmy, and he's a trans guy. So the band is kind of a big deal in the sense that it's a diverse group who have managed to take off and are spreading good messages with their music. And then the other main character is Angel, who is a die-hard fan of The Ark. The reason why I've started reading more boy band based books over the past couple of years is because I have ended up deep in group fandoms since I discovered K-pop. So since I got into K-pop and discovered so many groups that I love, I like reading stories that delve into fandom when it comes to musicians, because there are so many dark sides of these fandoms, and I've seen how much trouble they can cause with each other and with other fandoms. But what I did appreciate the most about this book is that it wasn't disrespectful towards fans, because we get that enough in the media as it is. It's always these middle-aged white men who are writing columns for these upper-class newspapers, just degrading teenage girls who listen to boy bands. We haven't got enough time for me to go on a rant about how I feel over that, so I'll shut up while I'm ahead. But this book goes into both sides of fandom. It shows you the darker things that can happen, and then it shows you how so many of these people who follow boy and girl bands can use that fandom for such good things. It helps them make friends, they organise events, they draw people who might be socially anxious and awkward around other people into groups where they feel comfortable enough speaking out. And you know, that is something that I have massively experienced myself in these past few years. As somebody who is very anxious when I'm in busy situations, I've been able to go to concerts and speak to other fans about our mutual interests. And so I love how this book shows that, you know, these fandoms, they're not always this ridiculous thing that all teen girls fall into at some point. It's a lot more than that. But then it also shows Jimmy's side of the story, and it shows how he's managing to front a band whilst suffering from anxiety, and the thoughts that he goes through, and his relationship with his fans. It's just such a fascinating aspect. And also the absolute best thing about this book is that it's not a Your Name situation. It's not a girl who ends up with the band and suddenly, you know, the members have feelings for her and they're fighting over her. You know, all those typical tropes that a lot of other YA music books tend to have. Angel does end up meeting Jimmy, but it's not in the way that you expect, and it's not that type of story. It just explores their feelings about their own lives. Yeah, I've waffled because I love this book so much. Number 1 on my list. Absolutely no one is surprised that it's Wayward Son by Rainbow Rowell. We're not shocked. We're not. I know I said I didn't love this as much as Carry On, but I still loved it a lot, and it's still my favourite read from last year. If you watch my review on Wayward Son, then you've already heard me talking on and on about this book, so you don't need me to chat anymore. So yeah, it was obvious that this is going to be my favourite book. It was my most anticipated read. It didn't disappoint. I'm so happy it exists. I can't wait for the 3rd book. Please give me the 3rd book. So they were my 7 favourite books from 2019. We're gonna have a little bonus because 7 books isn't a lot. I would like to tell you my least favourite book that I read in 2019. This is one that was published in, I think, 2015, but it took me a long time to actually read it. And it is Highly Illogical Behaviour by John Corey Whaley. I had so many expectations for this book, especially because I'd seen a lot of people hyping it up online. And it's about anxiety and a character who hasn't been out of the house in years because he's so afraid. And I love reading stories like that because obviously anxiety is something I deal with, and I think it's something that we need to discuss a lot more in YA. Even though there are a lot of YA books that deal with it now, a lot of them don't do it correctly, and this is one of them. We don't have enough hours in the day for me to discuss on video all of the reasons why I didn't like this book, so I did write up a blog post earlier on in the year, and I will leave a link to that down in the description so you can read that if you want the full reasons as to why I wish I hadn't gone near this book. But I just don't think this dealt with mental health in the way that it should have. And if that wasn't bad enough, I'd say the worst aspect of this book was the really twisted, not so love triangle that it had. I'm gonna go into a few spoilers if you haven't read the book, so yeah. But basically the main character, Solomon, is too afraid to leave the house, and he hasn't since he had a breakdown in school. One of his classmates, Lisa, is trying to look for a project that will help get her into university. So she uses Solomon as her psychology project to write about for her university application. She has a boyfriend. His name is Clark. She uses him to try and bring Solomon out of his shell. And then you think, because of events in this book, that Clark and Solomon are going to be a thing because Solomon develops feelings for Clark, and Lisa, despite being Clark's boyfriend, encourages that in the end because she thinks Clark has feelings for Solomon. And then it turns out no, Clark doesn't have any feelings towards Solomon. He's still in love with Lisa. They just had problems that they needed to work out. So at the end of this book, the straight couple end up living happily ever after, while Solomon makes a bit of progress on his anxiety, thanks to Lisa. It's not the fact that, oh, I wanted the gay characters to get their happy ending in this story. It's not that type of thing. It's just, I don't see why that weird love triangle had to even exist in the first place. There was no need for it whatsoever. You could have had Clark and Lisa being a couple throughout this story and having Clark be Solomon's friend without making Solomon develop feelings for Clark. It would have been so much better if they hadn't done that. It was kind of a non-plot twist. It just, yeah, Lisa was a horrible character. I just did not like her at all. The only good things that I liked about this book was Solomon and his family and their bond and how much they tried to support each other. There were aspects about it when it came to Solomon's anxiety that I think was done really well, but other than that, it just, I wish I hadn't picked it up, and I don't feel that way about books very often. Usually I don't post negative reviews on my blog unless I think I really need to talk about something. I'm one of those people that doesn't tend to post reviews unless they are 3 stars or more. And I know a lot of people think, oh, you're just being a nice person. But generally I don't read a lot of books that I don't like, so my blog ends up being a positive place, not because I'm not looking at books critically, but because I'm enjoying a lot of what I read. I ended up with a 2-star review on my blog last year because of that book. And so they were my favourite books from 2019. Please do let me know what you read last year and what were some of your favourites. Also, what you're looking forward to in 2020. I'm really hoping that I just get to read more this year so that maybe at the end of the year I can do a top 10 list, which I haven't done for a long time. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you next time. Bye!